Last week, we ended on a cliffhanger. We had just finished Sandy Frank's Gamera saga, but Mr. Frank's story isn't over, and this week we conclude with more foreign insanity and the rest that Season 3 has to offer. I'm Ryan Rodriguez, and this is the Coolness Chronicles, Season 1, The History and Legacy of MST3K. Chapter 4, The Japanese Season. Continued. As I mentioned earlier, Sandy Frank wasn't some monster movie distribution flash in the pan. He also imported several Japanese television shows, which I assume are for children, but again, because I don't understand the market for this type of programming, I could be completely wrong. And when I say he imported these shows, I mean that he took entire seasons of episodes and cut them up into 90-minute movies. Why he did this instead of taking the most profitable avenue of syndicating every episode, I haven't the foggiest. But he did what he did, and because of it, there's a song written about him. And I think it's safe to say that when he heard it, he was decidedly not pleased. We'll get to that shortly, but before we do, let's discuss the movies themselves. The sixth experiment of the season is proof that the Japanese have no basic respect for international copyright laws, and that American distributors have no qualms with taking that lack of respect and bringing it back to the land it was stolen from.
A scientific experiment backfires, catapulting a beautiful woman and two innocent children to a brave new world. A world where guerrilla warfare is literally a way of life. A world now ruled by vicious apes. Mankind is now all but extinct, and the few humans left face a cruel, brutal future. Is there any escape from this planet of the apes? It's an incredible journey beyond the limits of your wildest nightmare. A nightmare that takes you where Planet of the Apes never dared. Witness the fury, the terror, the unmitigated madness of the time of the apes. It could be sooner than you think.
The best plot description of Time of the Apes that I've ever read comes from the IMDb page. 3 bumbling morons accidentally stumble into a cryogenic freezer and end up in the future, where monkeys populate the Earth. They get terrorized by militarized apes, befriend a strange precocious child monkey that looks like a lemur, and spend an uncomfortable amount of time crawling through air ducts. Imagine everything that you hate about the Planet of the Apes series, eliminate any interior logic, and prepare to kiss 90 minutes goodbye. And don't miss the amazing twist ending where it's revealed that the 3 aforementioned bumbling morons were dreaming the whole thing, or they traveled back in time to the present, or they were dead the whole time and the narrative is actually a Jacob's Ladder scenario. I honestly do not know, and I know for a fact that Sandy Frank doesn't know either. It would be very generous to say that most of the plot inconsistencies of Time of the Apes is attributable to its origins as a 26-episode Japanese television series called Army of the Apes. But I'm not going to be generous. This show or movie or whatever would be terrible even without Sandy Frank, something I will go ahead and pre-state about the next few episodes as well. But can you seriously imagine watching this drivel for 26 episodes? That's a level of deep hurting that I cannot begin to imagine. I understand that it's for children, and primarily because children are too dumb to know what a ripoff is. But if I had to watch a mistranslated, poor facsimile version of Planet of the Apes for 26 weeks straight, I would go insane. And I watched a lot of horrendous crap as a kid. Personally, I would rather watch the 1978 series Star Wolf, based on that great series of American novels that everybody has clearly heard of. Sandy Frank decided that Star Wolf, which ran for 24 episodes, was so good that it deserved to be re-edited into 2 movies, the 10th and 18th experiments of the season respectively, Fugitive Alien and Star Force Fugitive Alien 2. The Fugitive Alien quote-unquote movies are well known for plot developments and special effects that steal whole chunks from Battlestar Galactica, which in turn was an American TV attempt to cash in on Star Wars fever, an illness for which there is no vaccine. What happens in them? Well, there are spaceships, groovy primary color leather uniforms, and a cigar-chomping, overly tanned Japanese Edward G. Robinson with his cheeks stuffed full of cotton, chewing the scenery like his life depends on it.
You're stuck here.
Also a big feature of these movies? Lots and lots of pipes. Because if you know anything about space freighters, you'll recognize that a large section of the freighter always looks like the most drab brewery you've ever seen. But what makes the Fugitive Alien saga so essential to the tapestry of life is its lovely, heartfelt story of revenge and attempted assassination by way of forklift.
This is the song written for the train chase. This is the chase, Rocky and Ken. He tried to kill me with a forklift. Olé!
The final affront to nature in the Sandy Frank package aired as the 10th experiment of the season. It is the only one of the bunch that actually retained its original Japanese title, Mighty Jack. Now, if I had no knowledge of MST3K and was given the name Mighty Jack and asked to describe what it was, my first guess would probably be a pancake mix. The writers decided to make a host segment based on a brand of dog food called Mighty Jack, so I really don't feel that stupid admitting it. What is it actually about? Again, I don't really know. Until the home video release, I had previously believed that this was just another episode of Fugitive Alien, only with slightly different characters and situations, but not enough to make a damn difference. I will say this though, unlike the other repackaged TV shows from Sandy Frank, which condensed the contents of entire seasons into 90 minutes, Mighty Jack is just the first and 6th episode stitched together. That means there are 4 episodes worth of material missing, but it's all so terrible that I challenge you to notice while watching. So yes, these quote-unquote movies are all terrible, on levels that defy all rationality, but the episodes are sublime. While MST3K being sweet and adorable is totally up my alley, I also love when they use their opportunities to hurl abuse at the people responsible for their pain, and if they express that pain in song, even better. Time of the Apes features what's commonly known as the Sandy Frank song, where they level some pretty mean accusations.
Come on everybody, let's do the Sandy Frank song! Sandy Frank!
Sandy Frank, he's the source of all our pain. Sandy Frank, Sandy Frank, woo!
Get about the house all day.
Sandy Frank, Sandy Frank,
Things that people come from trees!
Sandy Frank, Sandy Frank, gets hard movies from Japan. Woo!
Sandy Frank,
Sandy Frank,
films are always poorly done.
Sandy Frank, Sandy Frank.
Spielberg will return his calls!
Later on, during Fugitive Alien 2, the crew of the SOL spend an entire host segment doing a suite of the various hummable tunes in the movie, and end it all with a more reasonable, yet no less inflammatory ditty for Mr. Frank.
We are gonna find Sandy Frank. We just wanna ask him why. We wanna stick it to Sandy Frank and sit on his chest and gob on his face and make him cry. Yeah!
Let's Rob take it home!
I'm feeling really good.
Feels so good it shows. Yeah! 2, 3, and that's our song. We hope that you enjoyed it. And if you thought that it was stupid and dry, come on and kill us with a forklift. All we wanna do, with love from us to you, is sing the Fugitive Alien song.
It really does feel good to get all this stuff off your chest. The episodes also don't slouch when it comes to non-musical comedy. Time of the Apes features Joel and Crow playing T-ball off Servo's head, which leads to an inevitable and dangerous consequence.
All right, Crow, I want you to go along. Come on, buddy.
Okay,
Way out there, buddy. Way out there.
Is this gonna hurt? Are you sure it's not
Quit
gonna
being
hurt?
such a panty waste.
Hey,
Okay,
better,
just
better,
hold
hey,
still and nothing will
better,
get
better,
hurt.
hey.
Okay. Whoa, We'll be right back. Oh, thanks, Gypsy. You patched up the hole. Thanks a lot.
I thought I told you kids not to play ball in the house.
Oh, we're sorry. We're sorry. We won't do it again.
Coast is clear.
Go long, buddy.
All right.
All right, buddy. This one's coming out to
Shag it
you.
long, Joel. Shag it long.
Go way long. Way long.
way back.
Okay.
I'm open.
Yes! Yes! All right. Excellent. All right.
Triumph of the human spirits.
Fugitive Alien features the first appearance of Mike Nelson as Jack Perkins, and this requires a little bit of background. For some reason, the MST3K writers were obsessed with Jack Perkins, whom the Associated Press declared as, quote, America's most literate correspondent. Around the time of MST3K's production, Perkins had already served as a reporter, commentator, war correspondent, and anchorman for NBC's Nightly News and The Today Show, and was then hosting the only show that was airing on A&E, apparently, Biography. When telling the life stories of famous actors and directors, most of which didn't really deserve the honor, Perkins charmed and annoyed with his easygoing and gentlemanly nature, seemingly having a reverence for everything and having 3 anecdotes in his pocket at any moment.
Hello, I'm Jack Perkins. Welcome to Biography. For the past several years, we Americans have been celebrating the birthdays of Washington and Lincoln on the same day. Is that fair that they should have to share a holiday? Don't great men and great women of history deserve better? Well, we hope to rectify the situation a bit by giving one of them, if not his own day, at least his own hour. Aside from the cherry tree legend, which of course isn't true, most of us don't know much about George Washington, the man. Over the years, we've made him into an awe-inspiring idol, cold, remote, lifeless, a withering stare peering at us from a dollar bill. Well, in this hour, we'll take a look at the flesh and blood man behind that graven image. Join us now as Biography presents the life of George Washington.
But when Mike played him on MST3K, he was the house guest you never invited that refuses to leave. If he gave a musical symphony a loving description and somebody disagreed, he would, in an instant, go back on his word and simply find the right platitudes to pander to his audience. He was also a messy drunk that had to be subdued with a cattle prod on numerous occasions.
Hello. Today's experiment is called Fugitive Alien, a wonderful film from Japan, not to be confused with The Fugitive, the classic television series which can be seen weekdays right here on A&E. This is actually a strung-together series of Japanese shows which, when put together in this way, make for what I think is some of the best TV has to offer.
Thanks, Jack. Now
Then Joyce Carol Oates will be out to read from her wondrous new work of fiction, her first novel in well over a month. Then Peter, Paul, and Mary will be out to give us a wondrous rendition from one of their songs off their scintillating new album. Then Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy will be out to tell us some poignant stories of the joys and sorrows of being really, really horribly old.
Perkins was so popular among the writers that he actually got his own spin-off in 1993, the Mystery Science Theater Hour, but we'll get to that soon enough. Back to the old Sandy Frank episodes. Fugitive Alien 2 features one of the greatest moments in the show's history, and one of the first of a few times that the show weaved a little narrative between the host and theater segments. For this instance, we begin with the boys in the theater where some bad stuff is about to go down.
Captain, first we must find out what's wrong with the engines.
All right.
Oh boy, I'm feeling really bad.
Ken, let's go.
Oh boy, I feel like I'm just sinking off a spooky drunk.
What happened, buddy? It's all over the seat.
Servo's head explodes in a pretty convincing effect, and the following host segment is all drama. Well, mostly drama. Okay, fake drama, but great television.
Tom Servo! Oh my God, Tom Servo's dead! He's dying! It must have been that movie! Oh man, we're losing him!
A robot watches a bad film. It renders him unconscious. Next, on emergency 911.
Crow, you gotta step out of Shatner and help me! It means the life of our friend Tom Servo!
But I must finish Tech Wars of Venusia. Must direct Star Trek IX, The Search for Spock's Intelligence. Hooker's a good cop. Oh, he's a good...
You listen to me and you listen good. I need you to snap out of Shatner. I need you here now. Our friend's life hangs in the balance.
I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't know.
I know, man. I know. But we gotta get our little buddy out of the bone orchard, okay? Listen, I need you to run along and get the defibrillator, and I'm gonna try to get our brother Tommy out of the Badlands.
Okay, all right.
Come on, man. Come on back. We're all pulling for you, buddy.
Hey, Joel, is the defibrillator the thing that looks like a vacuum cleaner or a thing that looks like the battery charger?
It's a thing that looks like the battery charger. Now, would you get it together, man, and get out here? It means Tom Servo's life.
All right,
buddy.
you're good.
Okay, hold on, buddy. It's coming. Come on, hometown! Come on back, buddy!
Clear!
Clear.
Nothing!
Oh.
Clear!
Clear.
He's coming back! He's coming back!
Come on, Tommy.
Sean Dunson up to the plate now. Beautiful day here at Wrigley Field. Boy, let me tell you, perfect for an ice-cold Budweiser. And you know, Lincoln Carpeting at Joel, Crow, what the heck happened to me?
It's okay, buddy. You're among the living now.
Oh, that was weird. I was walking down a long hallway, and at the end of it, there was a bright light, and a kind man with a beard reaching his hand out to me, beckoning me. And he looked at me as I got closer, and he said, "Hey, buddy, can you spare some change? I want a cup of coffee."
Everything's a joke to you. That's great. We got commercial sign.
The incident isn't really discussed again after this, and for the rest of the episode, it's almost an anomaly, not being tied to anything afterward. Later on in the series, these little narrative threads would become full-blown episodes involving demonic evil twins and parallel universes, but again, we'll get to all that in time. For years, the 9 official Sandy Frank episodes were not in syndication and took quite a long time to be available commercially. There was a strong urban legend that blamed this on Mr. Frank himself, suggesting that the many personal attacks included therein hurt his feelings. Years later, Kevin would clarify that the actual reason was due to what Frank considered were insufficient licensing fees between the network and his company. It's also of note that Shout Factory not that long ago put out a DVD set called MST3K vs. Gamera that it no longer has the license to. Sandy Frank is even featured on that set in a newly filmed interview, one that makes it look like you'll probably have access to these episodes again relatively soon. By that, I'm suggesting that Sandy Frank is quite old and will probably die soon. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying that it's a thing that you'll have to deal with if you want to pay a reasonable price for DVDs. But for now, Sandy Frank can rest easily, knowing that he'll never be mocked on MST3K again, at least not directly. The same cannot be said for 2 other directors/producers whose work would make up a great deal of episodes to come, miniature master Bird-Eye Gordon and renegade producer and legendary cheapskate Roger Corman. Gordon's work was quite predictable. He had a penchant for featuring small animals transformed into giants using photographs, miniature sets, and rear projection photography. If he ever convinced anyone with his bag of cinematic tricks, I'll be goddamned. His movie King Dinosaur was featured in the 2nd season, but that was lesser Gordon. The good shit came in season 3, starting with the 9th experiment of the season.
She's a girl who loved a man. A man who, in a flash, became a living threat to humanity. A danger so awe-inspiring that they tried to hide his existence from the world.
The Amazing Colossal Man follows Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Manning, a man exposed to a plutonium bomb blast. He begins to rapidly grow in size, while his vital internal organs do not, slowly killing him, driving him insane, and giving him the idea to run around for the entire duration of the movie in a diaper. Given that it's an atomic age, supremely stupid sci-fi movie from the 50s, and that movie law decrees that all things that begin small and become giant must then rampage and destroy metropolitan areas, that's exactly what Glenn does until he's seemingly killed by the military. The character kinda lives on in the season's 19th experiment.
The foot that made that print is about 10 times the size of a normal man's.
What happens to our world if massive, monstrous man-beasts like this invade us?
War of the Colossal Beast tellingly features neither war nor beasts. Instead, we get a recast Glenn Manning, whose face is so destroyed and rotted that it's mostly skull, as he eats cows on the Mexican border, gets caught and doped up by the government, then promptly escapes and let loose minor havoc. I cannot tell you much about the movie because any time I try to watch it, I spend so much time wondering why the role was recast, as it was released a year after the first movie, that nothing ever has enough time to make an impression. Gordon has one more movie in Season 3, Earth vs. the Spider, which aired as the 13th experiment.
stories?
I don't know. Spiders. I told them to bring me one, and I'd believe it.
I can't say I blame you, Sheriff. But Flynn's still missing.
Deep into caverns whose very air is putrefied by the stench of death. They search ceaselessly for a missing man, or possibly a giant spider no one really believes exists, except the high school teacher who knows his science and his students.
This movie, which was theatrically released the same year as War of the Colossal Beast, features a giant tarantula wreaking the minimum amount of havoc on a nondescript small town as required by B-movie law. How did the tarantula get so big? Does it even matter? Good question. I'll have to get back to you on that. The actual episodes for Bert I. Gordon's movies include some fun moments, most of which include a shirtless Mike Nelson in a bald wig as Glenn Manning, having grown so large that he's literally standing on the earth and leaning on the satellite of love to have a little conversation. It's safe to say that he wasn't too happy about being recast in the sequel, and he even eats a few cows for good measure. Earth vs. the Spider introduces a character trait that would continue to grow and evolve throughout Trace's time on the show, and that's Crow's ambition to be a screenwriter. His first effort, a little horror movie called Earth vs. Soup.
Wait a minute, go through this again. I'm not getting this.
The deal is, when we get back to Earth, I want to make $1 bazillion writing screenplays, like Roadhouse and Next to Kin and stuff. So if you two wouldn't mind helping me out, we could do sort of reader's theater, and we'd read my latest screenplay and then do kind of note session afterwards. Is that okay?
Crow, we're friends and everything, but whenever I perform, I got to get some kind of compensation. You understand?
Oh, sure. How about $8?
Great, super. That's all I need.
Okay, you can invoice me. I'll shoot you out a check.
Fine.
Can we get going on this, you guys?
Oh, sure. Okay. It's called Earth vs. Soup. Okay.
Why soup?
What?
Soup?
Oh, yeah, I'm capturing that Cold War flavor. Giant ants, giant spiders, giant soup. I was going to call it Earth versus the giant Wendy O. Williams, or Earth versus a muffin, or Earth versus Peter Himmelman.
Crow, why soup?
Well, read it and see.
Sure.
Okay. Let's go. Okay, here we go. Earth versus Soup by Crow T. Robot.
Cute.
Okay, scene opens at the local greasy spoon called Bennigan T. Puffy Ranchers. Ben Sweetland, the town goat washer, orders his breakfast from Sweet Marie.
I'm Ben Sweetland. I see. Okay. Marie, Southern accent okay?
Yeah, it's great.
I got a big day coming up. Why don't you give me the Wyatt Earp 6-gun wagon wheel skillet scramble galjandra with a side of dookie links and... Well, see, what's the soup today, Sweet Marie, my little sock puppet, you?
Why, Ben, you watch yourself, you little cider press, you. I don't think you want the soup today. You see, Scabby was mixing up a batch of uranium-235 in the same pot as today's soup, which, by the way, is our California cornucopia vegetable jubilee.
Well, that don't make no never mind to me. Bring me a bowl of that, my little corn fritter.
Okay, but it's your funeral.
Dun, dun, dun.
What?
As a fellow unsuccessful screenwriter, I love this arc of Crows that became a way for the writers of MST3K to vent their frustrations about the ridiculous movies they're forced to watch, as well as the movies that they're forced to make, which we'll get to later. Crow tackles everything from monster movies to the spy genre, even dabbling in blaxploitation. That bot has some range. I would even go so far as to start a Kickstarter for the production of Peter Graves at the University of Minnesota that I played in Chapter 1, but again, I'm getting way ahead of myself. The episode also features a great quote from Gypsy that I want to download on my phone and play whenever I enter a room that I'm not welcome in, which is probably a long list.
Right, let's rock this mother!
I will say one thing for Bert I. Gordon. He may not have made anything well, but he sure made a lot of stuff, and did so in such a short period of time. Roger Corman is a very similar figure. We'll discuss him properly in Chapter 6 of this show, but here we'll just address him in a cursory way in order to best describe the 3 movies that he contributed to this season. First was the 11th experiment of the season, It Conquered the World, featuring MST3K favorite actors Peter Graves and the lovely Beverly Garland, who gets a full-page love letter from Paul Chaplin in the official episode guide.
What's this all about? What's everybody running from?
It's the end of everything.
What do you mean?
I'm not arguing theory, General. I'm here to ask you, to beg you,
to save your own world.
It, the most fascinating mastermind man can conceive. A monster that can control all sources of the Earth's power. Able to pull man-made spaceships from their orbits. Making of those it chooses slaves. Of this woman, a willing handmaiden. Of the chief of police, a cold-blooded killer.
Well, I've known you for 5 years. You just killed a man in cold blood. Why? I'll have to place you under protective custody.
Peter Graves, the scientist who fought it. Beverly Garland, who believed her love stronger than it. Lee Van Cleef, whose brilliant mind was captured by it.
Are you really ready to stop loving me?
I'll need you even when no emotion exists.
For a few dollars, you can hire a woman who'll fit all your fetishes. She'll match your requirements perfectly. Then if you ever get tired of her, you can always run down to the employment agency for another.
While these actors may be remembered fondly, the movie isn't. Like most Corman work, it's an exercise in padding and featured evil aliens from Venus that looked like rejected Gamera villains. It gets worse with Experiment 15.
All the men gathered? All the fools. Why do we hunt in a place where there are only a few dead trees and a few animals to give to the fire, when there's plenty there? There are shadows there, deep and cold, and dirt that eats men. And animals far more terrible than any you've seen.
What lies beyond? Just as modern man reaches into outer space, primitive man searches beyond his horizons, finding new and terrifying creatures in his prehistoric world.
Teenage Caveman stars the 26-year-old Robert Vaughn as the titular teenager and looks identical to Kyle MacLachlan in the 1995 Flintstones movie. I'm still not sure if that's an intentional reference or pure happenstance. The only thing notable about this movie is its Twilight Zone-esque twist that would have actually worked were this the Twilight Zone. Corman has gone on to deny ever having directed the movie, and Vaughn has called it the worst movie ever made. Neither are correct, but both get points for trying. The last Corman movie of Season 3 aired as the 17th Experiment.
In ships of their own making, sleek and wind fast, Viking women set out to combat the unknown terrors of uncharted seas. In spite of the fables told of the gigantic, the gargantuan, the fearsome great sea serpent.
Viking Women and the Sea Serpent is a movie about Viking women who go looking for their lost male counterparts, and there's a sea serpent at some point. Other than the fact that Corman accidentally almost drowned the entire cast during filming, there's really nothing about this movie worth discussing. Unless you have anything? No? I'll move on. Of all the actual episodes featuring Corman-directed movies, I've always been partial to Teenage Caveman, which features a knife fight between Forrester and Frank in Deep 13 that is equal parts bad 50s teen exploitation and Shatner Star Trek fight, with echoes of the prologue to the Michael Jackson Bad music video.
This week's Invention Exchange is going to blow your little mind, Warthog. It's the culmination of my life's work. It's the essence of evil, and it's a good friend.
Out. I'm doing the Invention Exchange this week.
I don't think so, Roy. It's my idea. I do the Invention Exchange.
I spent all night working on that bad boy. I'm doing the Invention Exchange this week. Take the train.
You just about had it, smart boy.
Oh, yeah? I'm gonna cut you, man. I'm gonna cut you, that's right.
Yeah?
Cut you bad, man.
Yeah, you want a piece of me?
Yeah,
come on.
I
You want a piece of me? Come on!
I'm gonna cut you a second smile, Daddy-o. Come on!
I don't think so. Come on, Jackson. Come on, sweet cakes. Bring it on through. You're gonna cut me? No, you're not gonna cut me.
What in the Sam Scratch is going on down there?
I don't know, but I don't like it. Not one bit.
Send in the movie, Frank!
No way. I'm looking at a dead man. A dead man!
Send in the movie!
I'm not gonna send him the movie!
Send in the movie!
I'm not sending him the movie!
You're movie this week, Joel, is Teenage Caveman with Robert Watson in the movie!
I'm not gonna sit in the movie! I'm not sitting in it! I'm not gonna...
It's one of the best examples of the chemistry between Trace and Frank, and it only gets funnier and a lot weirder from here. The season features 4 more episodes, 3 of them noteworthy, but first I have to go back to episode 19 to cover something that I glossed over. Before War of the Colossal Beasts, there is a short, and it's easily the most well-recognized amongst Misties. It's called Mr. Be Natural, and it's pure nightmare fuel. It features a magical sprite of a sexually ambiguous nature terrorizing a young boy by teleporting into his life at odd times to teach him about the spirit of music. Mr. B is portrayed by a woman, yet identifies as Mr. Throughout the short, it's never entirely clear who or what Mr. B is, and this confusion eventually leads to a point-counterpoint debate between Servo and Crow over whether or not Mr. B is actually a man or a woman. Especially in the context of our new age of gender neutrality, this short never fails to confound. For the record, Kevin gave what I feel is the definitive take on Mr. B in the episode guide. The Mr. B natural phenomenon, classically called the Mary Martin syndrome, is not only uncomfortable, it's downright damaging. A boy with great legs and boobs is just plain wrong. I can't put too fine a point on it. This unaddressed sexual confusion is the kind of thing that causes potentially well-adjusted young gay men to run screaming for the closet. He also points out that Paul Chaplin confessed in the writer's room to being attracted to Mr. B. I would make the same confession if I felt the same way. If I felt the same way. I'm not saying I do. I'm not saying I don't. None of your business. The remaining episodes of the season are Experiment 7, Daddy-O, which is notable for being referenced in Pulp Fiction and serving as John Williams' first original score, though you wouldn't even know it even if you notice his name in the credits. Of course, he's credited as Johnny Williams, so it looks foreign. It's worth watching for Dick Contino's unremarkable musical numbers and very remarkable hiked-up pants, which reach levels of Urkelian proportions, and make one wonder exactly how he can sing with a relatively deep voice and still have his slacks put immeasurable pressure on his testicles. I think I've mentioned it before, but every episode in the era of Deep 13 ends with Forrester instructing Frank to push the button, ending the transmission and sending the show into the closing credits. Because this particular episode ran very short, Frank pushes the button 8 times, interrupting the end credits each time. We'll hear maybe 6 seconds of Mighty Science Theater before returning to Deep 13 for more hijinks until finally the gag is over. This is something that irritates me to my very core, and I realize this may be an issue for me and for me alone. But have you ever wondered exactly where the phrase push the button came from? For the answer, we need to travel back to 1965 and discuss the Blake Edwards film, The Great Race. The Great Race is intended to be the first true live-action Warner Brothers cartoon. This would sound terribly impressive if its year of release wasn't 1965, as the 60s generally aren't known as the greatest time for Warner Animation. You see, color television was becoming culturally pivotal, and there was less demand for content to be played before a theatrical presentation, so budgets were slashed and fewer original shorts were produced, and those that were produced were actually made for television. And they felt slapdash and lazy and rehashed bits from more successful cartoons. The plot of The Great Race, however, is quite simple. 2 late 1890s daredevils engage in an automobile race from New York to Paris for reasons that are never quite clear and certainly never important. These contestants are the Great Leslie, the bland hero played by Tony Curtis with the charisma and complexity of a Ken doll, and Professor Fate, the one-note cackling villain played by the usually flawless Jack Lemmon with the subtlety and taste of a punch to the ribs. Natalie Wood plays a woman infatuated with the Great Leslie and eager to constantly tell everyone in the film that she's a proud, capable woman. It's like if feminism was seen through the lens of male chauvinism and misguided 1960s pride. The critics at the time were not kind to Miss Wood, who was denounced as poorly miscast, which is absurd if you look at a mere minute of either Curtis or Lemmon's performances. But before that critical mess, Miss Wood was terribly unhappy throughout filming, and even attempted suicide after the movie wrapped. It could have been worse, though, as Robert Wagner, her ex-husband, and the man currently assumed to have killed her, was pursued by director Blake Edwards for for the Tony Curtis role. Throughout the course of 2 hours and 40 minutes, there are a lot of rear projection process shots, some upsettingly broad slapstick comedy, and pointless tangents into parodies of westerns, silent films, and mistaken identity farces. It's also Spy vs. Spy meets Coyote and Roadrunner, but without any of the fun. 3 years later, the Hanna-Barbera cartoon Wacky Races did essentially the same concept, but much better, and that's really depressing to say considering that it was the standard Hanna-Barbera fare. Natalie Wood's character is Penelope Pitstop, Tony Curtis is Peter Perfect, and Jack Lemmon is Dick Dastardly, wardrobe and mustache and all. And what of his wheezing canine sidekick Muttley? Well, that's Professor Face's useless stooge Max, played by Peter Falk, giving what is the sole great performance in the entire movie. But what about Push the Button, you're wondering? Well, Professor Fate and Max have a car that has a million uses and perilous applications, all of which centered around, well, I'll let them explain.
Is ready. Yes. Yes, it's ready. There has never been anything like this. Professor, your greatest creation. Genius! Work of genius! The finest parts from the greatest automobiles in the world. The Hannibal Twin 8! And when it comes to the blizzards and the snowstorms, we will continue on just as planned. Push the button, Max! When the rains come and when the snow melts, we shall continue to rise above it. Push the button, Max. Nature will chase us, we will beat her, and brigands, thieves, cutthroats of all nations may hound us, but we are ready for them. We will blast them to kingdom come. We can mount, we can blast, we can rise above, we are invincible. Take us down. Push the button, Max.
After watching this scene, I was reminded instantly of the Netflix revival of MST3K, where Patton Oswalt plays TV's son of TV's Frank, or at least wishes to be called that, but Felicia Day's Kinga Forrester never calls him anything but Max. And since he's playing the role of henchman, he gets to push the button. You see? Everything eventually comes full circle. Experiment 20 of the season is The Unearthly, which, if it weren't for the host segments, would be completely unrecognizable to me. In fact, as I record this, I'm staring at the movie's Wikipedia page, and I'm still not sure if I've seen this movie.
The Unearthly takes you into horror beyond imagination. Starring John Carradine, a mad menace to humanity as the scientist possessed by a passion to remake people. Allison Hayes, the beauty slated to be his next victim.
Yeah, this does nothing for me. Anyway, the second host segment is one of the greatest in the show's run, and it did a lot to improve some of the major complaints regarding Gypsy's character. Gypsy has always been acknowledged as handling the higher functions of the SOL, which explains her unusual voice and perceived lack of intelligence, but even when she gets credit, it's mentioned as an aside instead of a plot point. In this segment, Servo narrates all the various dangerous and menial tasks that Gypsy undertakes, all while we see various still shots of her in the middle of work, always wearing a themed hat and glasses with a single lens.
This is the story of a robot named Crow. Can you guess what Crow is thinking? Crow is thinking hard, or as hard as he can think anyway, on how the satellite got so darn clean. It wasn't clean this morning. Think hard now, Crow. Think really hard, you poor dope. Scan that scrap heap you call a brain and try to find some piteous shred of thought or
knock it off.
Oh, sorry. Ah, yes, there it is. Who does these things when we're too lazy, too bloated on dinners of rich food and generous portions of our own gargantuan ego? Who debugs the massive computer control center because our own enfeebled brains can barely add fractions? Who provides the warm, inviting water in which you bathe your filthy, oil-stained carcass? who goes on mind-bendingly dangerous missions outside in the cold, black void of unforgiving space, while you sit inside, cozy as Alistair Cook, sipping cocoa and watching Tiny Toons. Pinch yourself hard, Mr. Robot. You deserve it. You think you're all sunshine and goodness, but you're nothing but dirt between the toes of an evil troll. That's right. Who periodically changes the plutonium rods in the nuclear reactor deep in the bowels of the ship, while you feast on gooey handfuls of fiddle-faddle and play hopscotch and marbles, and it's spring and the little goat-footed
Hey,
little man
now,
whistles
just a
far and whee!
dog-blasted minute here. What are you laying it all on me for? You're the laziest robot I've ever seen.
Oh, I see. It's me now, is it? Too painful to look into that deep, dark, truthful mirror, eh? You make me sick.
I thought you looked sick, but it's always hard to tell with you.
Yeah.
Oh,
the gypsy.
with the, I gotta go clean my room.
I'm gonna go clean your room, too.
It's gonna help me clean my
room.
Next up is the 21st Experiment and the first holiday-themed episode.
Santa Claus conquers the Martians. Santa sets up a fantastic automatic toy factory on Mars. The Martian leader battles the wicked Voldar in a desperate effort to save Santa, the wise man of Mars. 900 years old. The Battle of the Toys, when Martian kids and Earth kids join Santa to battle the bad guys of Mars. For real space-age fun, you'll be out of this world when Santa Claus conquers the Martians.
Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is one of the most popular episodes of the show, even if the movie isn't tolerable in any way. You see, Martians abduct Santa Claus because their kids are desensitized by television. 2 human children are also taken, and there's plenty of pratfalls and horrible attempts at jokes, and this is all bookended by original songs that make It's a Small World sound like Vivaldi in comparison. It's an episode that I've seen several times, but the movie burns every single time. I stick through it for the host segments because they're so good that they make the movie almost bearable. Almost. Its legacy has been enhanced by the fact that it's been riffed by the MST3K Spiritual Reunion, Cinematic Titanic, and riff tracks, so there is truly nothing further to say on the subject until we get to those endeavors. The MST3K version is still the gold standard, however, because those other riffs run through the entire movie in one long slog with nothing to break up the horror. And as I mentioned seconds ago, the segments that break up the movie are full of character development, some adorably sincere holiday magic, and music to boot. In this episode, Crow, Servo, Joel, and Gypsy spend their official Christmas in space. We learn a great deal about Crow in particular in this episode, whether it be his secret Christmas wish.
Guys, what are you doing?
Oh, just looking at catalogs, dreaming.
Oh, have you guys thought about what you want for Christmas?
Yeah, meet me. I want a Ted Williams signature inflatable bathtub pillow.
Oh, Gypsy.
I want a pony.
Oh, Gypsy, we don't have room on this ship for a pony. No, can't do it. What about you, Crow?
I want to decide who lives and who dies.
Oh, I don't know.
Commercial sign in 5, 4, 3, 2. Commercial sign now.
We'll be right back.
You're next.
Beat nose.
Hey.
Or the casual reveal that his favorite movie is Roadhouse, which he expresses his affection for in the form of song, giving birth to probably the most beloved musical moment of the entire show's history, A Patrick Swayze Christmas.
Wait a minute, let's have a Patrick Swayze Christmas?
Yeah, based on my favorite movie, Roadhouse.
Come on, what the heck does Patrick Swayze have to do with Christmas?
Hey, you keep Christmas in your way and let me keep it in mine, okay?
Come on, sir. It seems like a nice enough sentiment. We can give it a shot. Come on.
All right, okay. 12/8 time, key of A flat major. Cambot, shoot him the tune. Okay, you'll just have to stay with me, everybody, okay? Your parts are written out. Let's have a Patrick Swayze Christmas by Crow T. Robot.
Paul, let's have a Patrick Swayze Christmas?
Right. Hit it, Cambot.
Oh, I start. I get it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, pick it up. Oh, Open up your heart and let the Patrick Swayze Christmas in.
We'll gather at the Roadhouse with our next of kin.
And Santa can be our regular Saturday night thing.
We'll decorate a bar stool and gather round and sing. Oh, let's have a Patrick Swayze Christmas this year.
Or we'll tear your throat out and kick you in the ear.
Hold it a Cambot, stop it. Crow, I don't know if I think this is an appropriate sentiment anymore for Christmas.
Hey, what, like a good action sequence don't belong at Christmas?
Well, no, it's just that I've never heard of an action sequence in A Christmas Carol before.
Well, then grab hold of your socks and read on, Joe Robinson.
I would play the entire thing, but I think my show is already testing the limits of fair use as it is. If you want to hear the rest of the song, I suggest that you go to rifftracks.com and buy the episode. Also, tell them Ryan sent you, tell them who Ryan is, and tell them not to sue Ryan because he loves them. One last morsel about this episode. In the episode guide, Paul Chaplin contributed his thoughts on the episode, and in doing so, may have threatened a man's life. Leonard Maltin deems it worth highlighting that Milton DeLugg, what the hell kind of name is that, wrote the score. I certainly never heard of him. DeLugg may have written some great music for other movies, but his association with this one means his whole life was a fraud and a sickening waste. I wish he'd never been born. You hear that, DeLugg? For the song at the end of the movie alone, I will run you down if I ever get the chance. Then there's the coup de grace of Season 3, the next-to-last experiment, and, until the end of Season 4, the ultimate example of what the writers considered pain, the Castle of Fu Manchu.
Wow. That one really stung.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever.
Boy, I'd hate to meet this movie in a dark alley some night, huh?
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Hey, Tom, you got a little,
Don't.
No, really, you got a little...
No, just stop it, okay? Just stop it! Oh, see, this is terrible. I always stop the pain. Stop the pain. The pain is terrible.
Joe, what's the deal with Fu Manchu anyways? It's not like he's really evil, he's just dull. He's like some twisted bureaucrat in silk pajamas.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Crow, because I happen to have some artists.
No! What is this movie about? Well, it has Christopher Lee playing an Asian mystic, Fu Manchu. It also has scenic locations and people being present in those locations, doing things or talking. That's all I got. And I'm not alone. Again, from Paul Chaplin. This movie's mentioned every time we gather and talk about the worst ones that we've ever done. It looks okay and the music isn't too bad, but the plot stinks like crap. We never knew what was going on. The pattern of the host segments, with Joel and the bots continually breaking down while the Mads gloat, is a direct result of how bad this movie is, and how hard it was for us to write. We write the host segments the day after we watch the movie the first time, so we're filled with whatever pain the movie provides. This time we couldn't think of a host segment related to the movie, and we resented having to think about it. We get kind of pissy at times like that. This episode is basically pure waterboarding for the soul, and it's almost all worth it for the epilogue. Forrester and Frank decide, once the experiment is over, to prove to the SOL crew that they're overreacting by riffing the movie themselves, so they set up a projector and pick a random scene. It will be another 2.5 seasons before the evil duo actually riff a movie inside the Mystery Science Theater, but I'm just as fond of this moment.
I'll beat you at my own experiment.
Heck, we come up with funnier lines than you guys do.
Yeah, how hard could it be?
I mean, you know, in school I was something of a class clown.
Absolutely. Let's get the...
You know, at Arby's, when I worked there, I was so funny, my nickname was Zeppo.
Let's just get this stuff set up, Frank, all right? I should warn you, Joel, I used to be with the Toastmasters. I'm, somewhat of a wry wit myself.
Ready when you are, CF.
Ah, right. Roll them, Frank.
Look at that building.
It's big.
There's
It's huge.
Here comes a car that you could say something about.
It's so old. It's an old car.
Yeah, look at... Oh, and get a load of this lady. She's gonna get out of that car.
Turn it off! Turn it off! Well, until next time, crazy Guggenheim.
You know, we could have made funny comments, but the movie wasn't that good.
Gotcha!
The segment features one of the most frequently used movie quotes from George C. Scott in the fantastic Paul Schrader film Hardcore, where the legendary actor goes down a rabbit hole of depravity while searching for his missing daughter, whom he discovers is alive and working in pornography. The scene in which he makes the discovery and screams out in pain is so noteworthy that it was the centerpiece of the film's marketing campaign.
A controversial subject, a brilliant actor, a powerful and touching film, a movie which will take you into a world never dealt with in a major motion picture. A father searches for his missing daughter, only to find she has been used in a sordid and shocking way.
Turn it off!
George C. Scott, Hardcore, rated R. Coming soon to a selected theater near you.
We'll actually discuss Hardcore in a future non-MST3K related episode, but for now, anytime you watch the show and someone, usually Trace, starts growling, "Turn it off! Turn it off!" just remember that, in context, it's a pretty damn dark reference. And that was Season 3. As I mentioned at the start of this chapter, the third season brought new cooperation between the show's crew and the technically new Comedy Central, and that manifested in the show's first official marathon, a tradition that, after taking quite a few years off, still continues to this day every Thanksgiving. I refer, of course, to Turkey Day. I'll let the show's stars explain it all.
Joel, Comedy Central has a special Thanksgiving Day treat in store for you.
Really? I love Thanksgiving.
30 straight hours of the cheesiest movies in the galaxy.
Real turkeys. Get it? Turkeys.
Wow, that is so great. This will be a real treat.
Joel, I hate to break this to you, but all we ever do is watch cheesy movies.
Oh.
Watch Turkey Day. 30 hours of Mystery Science Theater 3000 all day on Thanksgiving here at Comedy Central.
Oh, we have so much to be thankful for.
Behave, company's coming.
Though this was an attempt at synergy between Best Brains and the Comedy Central brass, the first Turkey Day was a rather low-key affair, modestly budgeted, not unlike the show itself at the time. Future years would integrate more recurring characters, including Adam West, although that one didn't involve the show's creative team, and we'll get back to it later, and even amp up the production value, but the 1991 marathon was bare bones, and terribly charming because of it. It was later elaborated that the commercial breaks and episode segues were recorded when the cast and crew had an extra patch of production time to spare, and it completely shows. However, they did bother to create a narrative for the marathon, though, and it's one that actually deepened the MST3K universe a little bit. Again, it's not reinventing the wheel, but everything that I love about the show is there, and thanks to the folks at Shout Factory, eventually an entire DVD box set was dedicated to the tradition, including a featurette that compiled all of the host material produced for the various years.
Good evening, citizens of Earth. For the next 30 hours, you will be subjected to a constant barrage of pain, suffering, and low-budget angst, known to some of you as Mystery Science Theater 3000. And at the end of 30 hours, you will surrender to me, and I will rule the world.
Boy, look. Check it out. Look, I got, turkeys, stuffing, pie fixings, plus a new recipe that turns a potato into a progredo. This is going to be the grandest Thanksgiving of all.
Frank, I don't have time for Thanksgiving. I'm on the verge of world domination.
But we have guests coming over.
Frank, don't you understand? We're going to broadcast our Mystery Science Theater 3000 experiments across the country for the next 30 hours straight. And at the end of that 30 hours, all the people of the world will bow down before me.
That's all very fine, but you want to help me bring the stuff in from the car, please?
Oh, sure.
There's a somewhat sweet bipolar tenderness between Forrester and Frank throughout Turkey Day 91, going from extreme rage and annoyance one minute and somewhat ginger and affectionate the next. Forrester also shows remarkable restraint by not trying to kill Frank during the marathon, which I can't say for the next year. The special guests included Mike Nelson's quickly evolving Jack Perkins, Mole People Jerry and Sylvia, and a minor assist from Kevin Murphy as Plant Guy, a human head growing out of a planter that has plenty of stuffy and pompous bon mots to say about classical music. Jerry and Sylvia are reduced to a mere cameo, but Perkins got to show his darker side, like when he drunkenly taunts and berates his nemesis Linda Ellerby for being more popular than him. To this day, I only remember Miss Ellerby for trying to teach me about politics on Nickelodeon News when all I wanted to do was watch Doug or Ren and Stimpy, so I got a great chuckle out of Perkins' tirade. Up on the bridge of the Satellite of Love, Joel and the bots would pop up between commercial breaks to remind you that you're watching television, in the industry that's called a bumper, but that's all just technical jargon. And each member of the crew had their own theme. Crow is dressed like a dime store cosplay turkey, starting the marathon off with just a red rubber kitchen glove hanging from his mouth like a waddle, and ending it with what looks like white styrofoam pieces, turning his bowling pin mouth into more of a bird's beak. He also had fake tail feathers that are just as homemade as the rest of the ensemble. Crow's theme was turkey facts, which were simply anecdotes about how all turkeys are essentially really dumb jerks. Tom is dressed like a traditional pilgrim, looking as stout and self-conscious as ever with a large buckled hat. He also looks like a fussy child that was forced to dress up for a hastily assembled school play and gives horrific, if not entirely inaccurate, Thanksgiving history facts, usually involving genocide and racial strife. You know, the fluffy parts of the holiday. Gypsy is possibly dressed like a pilgrim, but she also does look like an Orthodox rabbi with Coolio dreadlocks. She doesn't have really a theme because she doesn't speak for the entire marathon. Joel is giving advice on how to cook stuffing, but looks completely out of it, as if all of his shots were recorded right as he was about to leave the door to drive home for the day. If he weren't the star of the show, I would have guessed that his appearance in the first marathon was somehow court-assigned community service. The set dressing for the SOL is minimal, completely undecorated except for a box of stovetop stuffing, a small box of potato buds, and an irradiated turkey that is sent to them towards the end of the marathon. It's worth noting that this marathon featured the debut of War of the Colossal Beasts, which, as I mentioned earlier, aired as the 19th experiment of the season, so the cast and crew were already more than a little pooped. In that way, it serves as somewhat of a microcosm of the show's third season, almost to the point of unstoppable genius, but still in a comfortable, adorably placid, very low-key niche. Season 3 sets the real groundwork for the future of the show, proving that the esoteric cleverness and pitch-perfect chemistry that the previous season's rebooted dynamic offered was not a fluke. At this point, there's no denying that MST3K is no flash in the pan. But as things were getting smoother and more ambitious on the Satellite of Love, the relationship that helped build Best Brains, that of Jim Mallon and Joel Hodgson, was quickly dissolving. Because of events that were to occur soon, that disillusion made all the more powerful and would make Season 4 the last to feature Joel in every episode. Much like discussion of the disastrous production of Darkstar in our previous chapter, things are going to get ugly, or at least as ugly as Minnesota Nice can get. We'll discuss that and much, much more on Chapter 5 of the Coolness Chronicles, Season 1, The History and Legacy of Mystery Science Theater 3000. But the show's not over yet, folks. Sorry. Every hour of this fine podcast concludes with a segment called Random Recommendations. This week's random recommendation comes from a Facebook user named Charles Gray. It was a movie that was far, far, far from my radar, the 2016 Canadian sci-fi indie The Void. I'm still not really sure what the movie's about, other than a bunch of people who hate each other, holed up in a hospital while being attacked by disgusting Lovecraftian monsters from another dimension, and a bunch of hooded cult members that feel like they belong in a villainous bureaucracy on the Venture Brothers. It tries to be like an early John Carpenter film, but while it utilizes practical effects for its monster and prosthetic work, it's less inspired by The Thing and more Assault on Precinct 13, but much less effectively. The effects are more David Cronenberg territory, emphasizing body horror in the form of self-mutilation and monsters that are a merge of the fantastic and the anatomic. But as cool as that may sound, it really just isn't in execution. It always feels like a tribute to something as opposed to something worth paying tribute to. It does have other batshit nutty details that I appreciated, notably the cult members, but not enough. If you're into small movies about weird shit like me, this may be for you. I just wanted something more than The Void was willing to offer. Please send me your random recommendations on Twitter, Facebook, or email, and make sure to explain why you endorse it. I didn't ask that at first, and it actually made research more difficult. Before I conclude, I wanted to thank everyone involved in making MST3K for everything they've contributed to my life and culture as a whole. Double thanks for also writing the episode guide that I will quote frequently in this season of the pod. And I also want to thank Shout Factory for their excellent supplemental material that was invaluable to my research for this and every episode to follow on this subject. You can get the show on DVD at Amazon.com, but if you want to support the artists who made this wonderful show, many episodes are available on VOD on RiffTrax.com. I'm not affiliated with any of these organizations, I just work here. Thanks for listening. Please rate and review the show on iTunes or your chosen source. If you enjoy the program, share it with someone else. This is the best and largest endeavor I've seen to completion, and it would be nice to keep making the show until it just isn't fun anymore. Links to all subjects discussed on the pod can be found on our website at www.coolnesschronicles.com. There you can email your questions, comments, or random recommendations. You can also contact me on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan, or like our Facebook page and watch for updates. Have suggestions for future seasons, as this series is not exclusively about MST3K, it's just a natural first topic, or things to discuss that are MST3K related, send them on over. If you want to advertise in this program, I'm a total sucker for a sponsor, so I'll pimp out any product you have. And our next chapter will be posted soon. Until then, do what you love, don't be a dick, and as always...
Hey, mister, wait a minute. Carry your bags.
What, you think you're big enough?
You little puss? Let's see you carry him, pussy. Come on, pussy boy.
I mean, goodbye. For now.